Hi, welcome back to my channel. My name is hautemesstom, and if you are new here, thank you so much for tuning into my channel. My channel is all about using and loving my collection as the way it is. I am currently on a 6-month no-buy. A big part of my collection, though, happens to be the Pat McGrath Mothership palettes, and I feel like I've never really spent enough time with all of them to have a firm opinion on them. And what I thought we could do is, over a series of videos, spending some time with each of the motherships, talk about them, do a little bit of a review, and then at the end of this series, we will rank all of the Pat McGrath palettes that I own. But famously, I am not buying the Mothership 9 Utopia palette 1. I'm on a no-buy. 2, I think it's very repetitive. If you want to hear more about my opinions on that, please check out the video in the cards or in the description below. So if you are familiar with the way I do reviews with my foundations, this is not going to be as intense. We're going to do a little bit more lax because I feel like with eyeshadows, people are a little bit less picky with ingredients. I also might be a little bit less picky with ingredients when it comes to eyeshadow. Like, I just want to know about performance. Was it worth it? Would I buy it again? That's kind of what we're covering here. We're going to go shade by shade, talk about them a little bit. And then I also will do swatches, which I am very bad at. But I will put those in as we talk about it. So we're gonna go in numerical order, or Roman numerical order, as Pat McGrath likes to do, and talk about Mothership I. And if you're not familiar with it, here is the color story. One thing about, okay, this is just you and I having a conversation right now. Speeching, hi, hello. One thing I hate about eyeshadow reviews on youtube.com is that people maybe use the palette once and then they give you their opinion on it. But first impressions are a different thing than using the palette for a while, because sometimes you use a shade, doesn't work well the first time, and then you play with it and then you figure out like a different methodology of putting it on your eyes, or maybe it's a good highlight, or maybe, so, exploring the palette in more than one sitting. And I think that is a disservice to us, the viewers, because this is not a full review. So I did buy this palette last year. I've had it for about a year. I bought it when we were in quarantine, so Pennsylvania was in quarantine from March to June of last year. So it's been over a year. I spent some time with it. One of the OG palettes, this one's not the one I've had the longest. I have been using it for the past couple weeks, and I started this video series in my head and footage of it a while ago, so there was like a whole month where I was like just using this palette. I'm not going to use all of the future palettes that we discussed for a whole month, because I've dipped into all of them at some point, and so I just want to be able to use the palettes, use the shades enough to really be able to speak to them, and then help you and help me decide whether or not these are worth having in our collection. The Mothership one is definitely like a cool tone palette, so if you're not into cool tones, boom, done, you're out. You're not spending $125 on this, but if you like cool tones, let's talk about it just a little bit more. So, the layout of the Pat McGrath palette is pretty similar across the board, with the exception of a few of her palettes. Sorry if I'm looking down, I'm looking in the monitor. I'm like, what shades can be seen? So this shade up here on the top left hand corner, this is a highlight. And it's like, I assume Mother wants us to use it as an inner corner highlight. It feels different than all of the other shades in the palette. Not high impact, even as far as highlight goes. It's just very like glow from within kind of glow. I find that these don't vary much from palette to palette, but we're exploring them together, but we're talking about this palette today. Then you have three to four mattes depending on them, and so everything from here over that isn't this top left shade are mattes or shimmers, just typical. Now, the 4 shades that appear on the right-hand side of the palette, this is the sweet spot. This is where Pat McGrath really got all of us makeup lovers when these started launching. And now these are baked pigments, and they are just different. They don't feel like eyeshadows, they feel like dry. They have a lot of shimmer to them. That's why I think a glitter adhesive is going to be a good idea, or if you have a makeup mixing medium, something like the Mayron mixing medium. And Pat McGrath also just launched her own mixing medium, so if you want to try hers, I haven't heard anything about it yet, so maybe seek out some other reviews on that. Mayron, Makeup by Mario has one, Duraline, so something like that to mix with these really intensifies them. But let's go shade by shade. We'll start with Skin Show Nude. I don't have the This is like not the kind of eyeshadow I'm looking to put on my eyes. Even as like an inner corner highlight, I want something that's gonna have a lot more impact than this. I like an impactful eyeshadow look for the most part. Now I'm not trying to do a disservice to this, but when you look at all the other shades in this palette, there's like a lot of intensity going on, and then this is just so soft. So it does look very nice when you use it on the face, but I'm not using something, I will use it on my face. I'm not gonna reach for one of the Mothership palettes to like put it on my literal face, not my eyeballs. So this shade spot is typically a missed opportunity for me, and it's just like not really my favorite. I guess we'll go along the top row and then we'll go along the bottom row. So now the next shade over, this is the shade Depth, and this is just a very cool toned gray. I mean, obviously gray is often, can only be cool toned. I'm not a color theorist. Get your color theory from somebody else. I have basic color theory knowledge, and I would say this is like a mid-tone gray. Like, it is very middle of the board, and obviously there's a theme here if you look at the mattes. So just remember that. And I really like this one. It's a very good crease shade, and what the beauty of this palette in particular, because we're talking about this one, is that you can do something very soft, but also this palette looks really extreme. It depends on how sheer your application is. So I will say they have good impact. If you're packing them on, you're gonna get instant pigmentation. But if you're using something fluffier, you can definitely make a very beautiful gradient with this shade alone. Like, you can really just do a whole matte eye look with just this shade and still get dimension with it. You just have to like play with pressure, how much pigment you're applying in different parts of the eye. So I actually really like this shade. It's probably the shade of the mattes that I use the most, because the other two are very different in the way that they perform. So like this one, it's just like very nice, very beautiful, a nice, you can either do a gray wash or you can just like have gray on your eyes. Also, if you are into something like that kind of shade, you could just do it all over the lid and just have like a nice, simple, easy, smoky eye. Moving right along is the shade Ultimate Taupe. So I use this most as a buffer on the outside whenever I've gone too intense, you know, to do a nice transition. That's the word I was looking for. It's a very nice transition shade for all of the cool tones, so it like takes your skin and kind of like cools it down, and then really gives the eyes this, you know, just really makes everything just look very, really blended. I will say, like, on the eye, it does show up, but I always start very fluffy and light. That's how I like to do my makeup application. That's how I like to do my eyeshadows. So that's like how I'm playing with these. But I guess if you went with something a little bit more dense, then maybe you would get more impact from the shade. But to me, it works mostly as a transition shade from my natural skin into something like the shade next to it or the black, where it just like helps that transition happen very beautifully. But if you are like super, super pale, I'm sure you could use it as a crease shade. However you really want to use it, just, you know, play around with pressure and amount of pigment you have on the brush. This shade right here, this is the first of like the special pigmenty feeling shades. It is Pale Gold 002. It's kind of a callback to one of her limited edition kits that she did before she launched the brand, where there's permanent product. And I don't touch this shade a lot. It's not the kind of gold that I'm into. Again, it plays really well with these two if you want to do like just a very simple little smoky eye with some gold shimmer on it. This doesn't have a lot of impact, like I would say like a lot of these other pigments that we will see and talk about have. I don't have, it's a cool tone gold. I'm iffy on gold, and we will be doing a video where we compare all of the golds in the Pat McGrath palettes, because as I was talking about the new Mothership palette, I realized how much gold and repetition there was in gold amongst the Pat McGrath palettes. So this one is like, for me, it's not really something that I want, but if you do like that sheer gold shimmer, I think you would really like that shade. And if you use it with a mixing medium, it doesn't really like take it to the next level like some of the other pigments that we will talk about here. So the next shade I would say is probably one of like the first shades that catches your eye, and it's called VR Violet. Now, the way, this is it's a duochrome, so it shifts pink. So if you see when I'm turning it, it turns pink, but with the direct light, the way I have my lighting set up, you can only see it obviously at different angles. And I also have this shade on my lid today. I have it also another shade in here, like topped on top of it. But it's interesting because like I can only ever see the blue on my lids, but I'm sure if you catch it from different angles, it's gonna have that like pink shift. Very pretty. One of the shades where you're like, that's why I would buy this palette. And like, of course, that's like one of the reasons I bought this palette, but also, you know, a collector, a Pat McGrath up until a point. So that's another reason why I have it. But like this shade just really, it is so sparkly. Again, an adhesive would be useful for this. You can get some fallout. I would suggest doing your eyes first with Pat McGrath palettes. Not like a ton of fallout, but like with these pigments specifically, fallout is like inevitable, I would say. Even if you're being the most careful you can possibly be. Yeah, I would say that this is one of those shades where you're like, oh, that's like what Pat McGrath is about. And it really is. Works really good with the mixing medium. The mixing mediums take it to the next level. I really like it layered on top of a black base because you get like a real good shimmer. It's really nice on the skin too, but I find that giving it that black base really kind of takes it to the next level. And I recently have decided that I'm just like very into like an all over black smoky eye with like beautiful shimmers on top of it. So it really works for me. This palette really, really speaks to that. So next up we have Extreme Black. This is a very nice black eyeshadow. Swatches really well with the finger. Goes really well on with the brush. You do have to build it up a little, but I think that's okay with the black. Black eyeshadow can be scary. Black eyeshadow can be scary. You can use it as a liner, even if you like wet your brush a little bit and go with a good liner look. So if you are really into smoky eyes, I would say that this is like a really good palette for you, especially if you like cool tones. Like this is really gonna be like a nice palette for you. It's a very nice black. It appears in a couple of the palettes. I also have a single of this from one of the old kits. Next up is Lilac Dusk. And now this is actually one of my favorite shades in the palette. It's a little bit of a sleeper hit. When you look at it, you're like, that's a silver, but then it also has like this beautiful like purple kiss to it, and it's not intense. I think in the palette you're like, that's gonna look really intense. It's very sheer. It's actually very, very sheer. Even with a finger application, just like rubbing it all over the lid is just like a look. And I would do a lot of like soft looks with these two up here and this, and it's just like, it's very nice. It's very nice. I also have been very into lilac recently, so I think that like also leans my favoritism towards this shade. I often think that people overlook the shimmers in the Pat McGrath palettes. They really do that sometimes, not all the time. But this shade right here, I think is a very, very unique shade. I don't see a lot of like this silver lilac sheer kind of thing. And it's like kind of the epitome of a luxury shimmer is the shade right here. Intrigue, beauty, ease. And that's like what I think of when I think of luxury makeup. And I think this shade is just all of those things. So next up is the shade Substance in the middle here. Again, I think just like lilac, this lilac shade here, this shade at first glance I think is a very intense looking. You're like, it's gonna be so deep and smoky. You can do a real soft look with this too. It's obviously gonna be gray, and I think it does have a little bit more depth, like more impact than the lilac shade we just talked about. But you can do something very soft with it and it still looks very beautiful. Or if you wanna really smoke it up, you can put it on top of Extreme Black if you like really wanna take it to the next level, or just like do a few layers of it if you really want just this shade, so you want that gunmetal look. I wouldn't reach for this first if I just was going for a gunmetal look. Like, I don't think it has that kind of impact. But again, luxury shade, easy, breezy, intrigue, beautiful. All right, next up is like, I guess like would be also one of the selling points is the Blitz Blue. It's this guy right here. It is very, very pretty. It's interesting though. It's like, I would say my favorite shade probably is the VR Violet, because I do like that chip. But this is very nice too. Actually, my favorite way to use it, I hope maybe you'll be able to see it, but I like to use it as liner. It's like a very pretty liner. It just like really does that. With a mixing medium that makes it like a little bit like liquidy. Chef's kiss. Beautiful shade, beautiful blue. You know, I've been talking a lot about like layering these shadows. This on top of black also has a high impact. It's actually not on my eyes at all. The blue is all coming from VR Violet. So it's very interesting how you could probably think that maybe I have this shade on my lids, but I do not at all. It is like blue. It's like almost a primary shimmer blue. It is just so stunning. Finally, we have the Astral White Pigment, which is this little stunner down here. Now, this shade in particular doesn't really have a, like these shades down here don't really have a base in the blue. It's pretty pigmented. This one I find, VR Violet, I also find that it like has some base to it where if you put it on the lid, it does like something beyond just putting like the shimmer on. This shade is almost like pure shimmer. If you mix it with a medium and put it on the inner corner, it does kind of give you that very intense highlight. I also have it on the middle of my lids today. Like I'm doing like a very lazy halo eye situation on my eyeballs today. But you don't really like, there's no base layer to it, so you are just kind of getting this wash of like white and blue shimmer. It's very pretty. This one's like peak layering. Peak layering. Goes on top of every other shade and looks very stunning. I like it the most as the inner corner or like mixed with something on the inner corner. I think that's just like so stunning. Or again, doing a soft look with these two and then just putting that all over the lid. It's so pretty. I also did an underliner look the other day. I don't think underliner is for me. After giving it a whirl, I don't think underliner is for me, but I put this on the lid so that my lid wasn't just completely bare, and it just like gave you some intrigue, gave you just a little bit of a wash. So it's like that. Here's the thing about Pat McGrath and these Mothership palettes. Are you willing to spend $125 on eyeshadow? If not, that's totally okay. You don't need Pat McGrath. That's not something that you need in your life. It is nice. The packaging is just like A1. This packaging, I mean, I don't know that I'm ever gonna find another eyeshadow palette packaging that I'm gonna adore as much as this. It does get a little bit fingerprinty, but like the weight of it, there's just a feeling about it that is like very nice. Okay, second question to myself, would I buy this again? Do I like it enough that I would buy it again? Absolutely. I think that this one, Mothership I, is like that cool tone blue palette that I don't think a lot of other brands have anything like this. You can go very smoky, you can go very soft. It's more diverse than first looking at it. You can do a lot more things with it than I think that at first glance, because you're like, oh, it's just for the blues. But you don't even have to use the blues. You could just do a smoky eye. You could just use the mattes. The mattes are very pretty on their own. You could use the pigments just on your lid, and it's just like a wash of that little bit of shimmer, making you look a little bit glowy. Like you can do a lot with this palette. So I definitely would buy it again if given the opportunity, but it's also, I own it. But like if I were to run out of this, which I'm not going to, like if I were ever use this all the way up, I would buy another one for sure. I would say if we were giving this a ranking out of the eyeshadows that I love in it, it's an 8 out of 10. It's not something I reach for often. It's definitely like a very specific palette. You want to do very specific looks when you pick this up, so I can understand that. It's like not the most versatile of palettes. I would also say it's like not an everyday palette unless you really, really like cool tones. So those are all things to consider if you were interested in the Pat McGrath Mothership I Sublime palette. I don't think it's a bad buy, but also if you don't want to spend $125 on eyeshadow, fair enough. And if you do, fair enough. I would say Pat McGrath, the website, if you are interested in Pat McGrath products, runs many sales throughout the year. I'm not even joking, like many sales. Most of the time, the minimum discount is 25%. So there's no reason to spend full price on Pat McGrath products. And then also in equal but opposite, Sephora does a couple sales throughout the year. You can at least get 20% off, 15% off, 10% off. So I would say hold on to your money, save up a little bit if you were interested in this. Get it whenever it's discounted. Just put your email in that Pat McGrath email and wait for those discounts to come in, because you don't have to wait long, I promise you. All right, so I hope if you were considering the Pat McGrath Mothership I palette that this was helpful to you at all, or let me know if you already have this palette, if you disagree with me, if you think this would be worth buying. It would be a great conversation to have. We all have differing opinions. If you bought it and hated it and would never buy it again, I would love to hear from you and why that was your experience with the palette. And if you're new here, please hit subscribe. Would love to have you hang out with me, and be sure to like this video, so if other people were interested in this palette, they'll be able to see my review. I appreciate you so much for watching my video. Oh my god. I appreciate you so much for watching my video. I will see you in the next one. Friends.